of Sales at Highmetric. And today we're going to be talking a little bit about Integration Hub, specifically with use cases around connecting Salesforce Sales Cloud to ServiceNow CSM. With me are Adam Lako and Todd Schumacher, two of my longtime colleagues. Adam runs our service delivery in the West, and Todd is one of our senior solution consultants who will be walking us through the Integration Hub connection between the two products today. So just to level set, today's agenda is essentially a quick comparison of Orchestration versus Integration Hub, because many of you may have some of the older Orchestration products installed on your ServiceNow instance. We want to just make sure that you sort of understand the differentiation between Integration Hub and Orchestration. From there, we'll flow into, no pun intended, an overview of Integration Hub and some of the, some of the feature sets there. And then finally, we'll walk through 4 separate use cases that demonstrate the integration between ServiceNow CSM and Salesforce, live here on the screen. So just quickly, at a very high level, as you may recall, for the last 4 or 5 years now, ServiceNow has had orchestration capability, which is facilitated like every other sort of capability on the platform. That is to say that it's built in the platform, and by and large, it leans on sort of workflows. About 3 years ago, ServiceNow decided to standardize its integration approach because of a variety of different sort of benefits that sort of prepackaged integrations would offer to its client base, and it introduced Integration Hub. The initial versions of Integration Hub didn't have necessarily as many features as Orchestration. However, by the Orlando release, there was feature parity between ServiceNow Orchestration and Integration Hub, meaning that the feature sets between the two products were actually the same. Having said that, many customers who bought the old Orchestration capabilities haven't been able to take advantage of some of the new Integration Hub capabilities. And so today we want to showcase what some of those look like. But to be clear, now Integration Hub actually has become more feature rich than Orchestration. So by moving from one product SKU to the other, ServiceNow customers are actually able to enhance their capabilities on the platform. From there, Adam, I'll just quickly turn it over to you to talk a little bit about some of the features gained with Integration Hub.
All right, thanks so much, Andrew. So today we're going to be going through kind of, we'll start off and talk about, what is the difference between Orchestration and Integration Hub, Flow Designer versus Workflow Editor, how all these things differentiate from each other, and really what the path is going forward with Integration Hub and Flow Designer. So as Andrew mentioned, there's been just a huge amount of additional features added with Integration Hub as opposed to the old Workflow Editor and Orchestration system. On the screen here, sorry, go back, Todd. So just to go through the bullet points a little bit more in depth here, and some of these get a little bit nuanced. Todd, if you could go back a screen.
I did. You're not seeing it?
Oh, I can go back here. So the authoring accessibility is really a huge value add here. So you can more granularly get to and give permissions to people to use and build flows through the Flow Designer rather than the Workflow Editor, which was a little bit more restrictive in nature. Functionality in terms of introspection to be able to use third-party APIs easily and faster to build things through the Flow Designer and through Integration Hub capabilities is huge. That way you can just become more dynamic in the way that you interact with APIs and be able to introspect exactly what is at your endpoint. More reusability, call actions and flows from anywhere. The ability to do spoke discoverability right in the authoring tool. These are just, some of the really kind of technical in the weeds details that are really valuable when it comes to the differences between the Orchestration, Integration Hub, Flow Designer, and Workflow Editor. These bullet points really highlight that. They give someone with that's a subject matter expert, but maybe not a developer, the ability to drag and drop things from within the Flow Designer and use these pre-built actions and pre-packaged spokes that are going to be really valuable and easy to integrate things. But they're also they don't detract from somebody that does want to get into the weeds and build their own actions and build their own scripts and define their own capabilities very granularly through the system. So next slide, please, Todd. And the Integration Hub kind of circle slide here shows high level what is the integration hub, right? So it's a platform level module. We can use it to do a number of different things, to execute actions with third-party systems, and this can be done through data streaming, through real-time processing, through shell commands, JDBC database connections, REST and SOAP, SSH, just a massive amount of capabilities from a technology standpoint and a technology stack to be able to connect the different things outside of the tool, however you need to, right? Because we know not every tool is built the same, not every API is the same. There's so many different variances across these different tool sets. So Integration Hub is a reimagining, an updated version of what's capable out of workflow editor and the orchestration existing today. And as you saw from a couple of slides ago, ServiceNow has just spent a huge amount of effort and time to build out that capability and make it very extensible so that it can grow, very much into the future. And next slide, please. And to use the Integration Hub capabilities, it's really all about the Flow Designer. And the Flow Designer is, the new way to build flows and replaces the workflow editor. So going forward, you'll be able to see this really streamlined interface to be able to interact and define your own flows, subflows for reusability, actions, and data streams. And this will continue to grow going forward. So we can see the kind of the personas in the top right there that are really meant to be able to use the Flow Designer. So your IT subject matter expert that may have the technical details in terms of how we want to connect with things using the Integration Hub components, as well as the business analyst that understands what is the process that needs to happen and govern around these different flows that we design. So there's just a really streamlined, easy to use interface. You can see things are very easy to follow and go down actions 1, actions 2, 2.1, 2.2. So it's very it's laid out very easily. And if you haven't used the Flow Designer just for your internal capabilities, maybe not even using the Integration Hub components, it's the same setup. So you have commonality there between how you design these flows and how you come up with the process in which these things run through to be able to achieve your requirements. Next slide, Todd. So this is just if you haven't seen the Flow Designer, this gives you a couple more screenshots of that, right? So it's as easy as doing drag and drop capabilities with the existing actions that exist that come with Flow Designer. But then you can get into the weeds, as mentioned before. You can create your own pre-processing scripts or handling error scripts to really get into the weeds to define exactly what you need to do. So it's really that wearing multiple hats type of person that can take advantage of this tool. If you understand scripting, you can get into that level of detail. If not, and you want to be able to use the pre-configured actions and spokes, as long as those fit your need, then you can definitely take advantage of those. Next slide, Todd. And so from an organization standpoint, I think this is really valuable from the transitioning from the workflow editor to the Flow Designer, which is, the workflow editor could really, you could easily turn that into overlapping redundant labyrinths, right? Especially as you iterate through versions of workflows and make modifications, as many of us do in the platform, right? As things change, as processes change. It was easy to go into the workflow editor and sometimes create a little bit of a mess in the workflow editor, right? So readability was only as good as the developer's organization skills when they're configuring and developing those workflows. And sometimes that can get pretty confusing. With the Flow Designer, it's very much a top to bottom type of experience. You read it like a turn-based direction or even a recipe. So the readability is baked in to the Flow Designer with human readable annotations easily viewed as part of that flow. And I think that's really powerful because, one of the biggest draws to Flow Designer and Integration Hub, especially Integration Hub when you're talking to other systems, is, making sure that information, the context about why you're doing something as far as an integration goes, or why you're connecting to this API, or why you're reaching out to this endpoint in the flow is really important, right? Because we know how attrition is in the IT field. We know how people change positions and leave and go from organizations. But having the documentation not in a SharePoint file or somewhere else, but baked into the flow, baked into the recipe of what someone's seeing is really powerful when it comes to either internal process flows or integrations in general. Next slide, Todd. So another another great aspect of Integration Hub is just the ability or the investment that ServiceNow is making to continue to build more and more spokes available to utilize APIs that are already out there. And this is just a screenshot or a listing of spokes that are in either under development or in consideration for later phases. This doesn't show any of the existing spokes that exist today, and obviously ServiceNow has focused primarily on a lot of those spokes that are high demand spokes, and obviously the one that we'll be focusing on today being the Salesforce one. But this is just there's continuing to be a lot of effort, a lot of development put into utilizing these capabilities and making it as easy as possible for people to get a quick value return on value on using the Integration Hub across all of the different third-party systems that you're looking to talk to from ServiceNow. Next slide, Todd. So now that we have that overview, I really want to kind of dive in from the 20,000 foot view, the 10,000 foot view. We'll kind of telescope into what exactly the use cases that we want to focus on today, right? So when we talk about customer service, we talk about customer service management and the CSM product in ServiceNow. We talk about all the different pieces that kind of go into that organizational process flow, right? So obviously starting with sales. How does an account, an asset, a service, a request, all these different fundamental foundational things get created in ServiceNow if ServiceNow is your customer service, engagement platform? So getting the account information, the contact information, all aligned properly so that people can utilize those pieces of those elements of data and be able to provide the best customer service they can is the end goal, is the goal of everybody that provide CSM service to their customers. So in being able to do that, we need to bring that data in and make sure that there's not conflicting or inaccurate data across these systems. Salesforce being a very relevant one when it comes to landing new opportunities and landing new deals, and those being able to bring into the ServiceNow system as quick as possible. So this is kind of that view of all the components end to end that CSM within ServiceNow can connect, right? We can connect the sales systems, the customer master data, with the work order management, the revenue management, anything that needs to flow in and out of ServiceNow from an engagement standpoint. Your customers engaging with you and therefore with your external systems or third-party systems to ServiceNow can all be done very easily through Integration Hub using these various spokes, utilizing the Integration Hub as that platform. All right, next slide, please. So what we see in the typical integration flows, we see things like account information, we see contact information, we see opportunity information, products, orders, contracts, entitlements. All these things can be stored in your sales system and need to be aligned with how you engage, retain, and expand your customers through your customer service management, right? So getting those accounts to flow, those contacts to flow, making sure you have up-to-date information, and then also giving that visibility back up to the sales team, the cases or incidents or products that are inquired about and things like that a salesperson really wants to know, and is going to help enable them to do their job better is going to be the ideal situation here. So utilizing the Integration Hub spoke is going to enable us to do that, and we'll see that in the upcoming scenarios that we're going to run through. We have 4 different scenarios that'll kind of walk you through how we achieve some of these things in our demo system and show you what the possible capabilities are here. And then we can see downstream even more back office, right? So how do we, when services are utilized by your customers, we can hook in things like back office tools and back office systems to be able to show bill history and be able to bring all those pieces together for that customer to get the full picture. This reduces calls, this reduces frustration, this reduces a lot of things that people get frustrated about the customer service management experience on a day-to-day basis. Next slide, please. So some of the spokes that we're going to focus on, and this is just kind of an overview of the Salesforce spoke features. These are, various things called actions within the ServiceNow spoke, Salesforce spoke. So we can do things like record management, we can do account management, case management, contact, lead, opportunity, orders, and user management. These are pre-built actions, pre-built capabilities that make building these flows a lot easier, right? This doesn't necessarily mean you're limited to this, but this means that this is more of that drag and drop light configuration that that can be done, as opposed to that custom action, custom scription, or custom scripting, and have to develop to a specific API endpoint very explicitly. So having these spokes at our fingertips made building these integrations easier, and obviously can make them more dynamic for whatever purposes you might have as well. All right, next slide, Todd. Which brings us to our first use case. And so what we'll do here, the way that we'll kind of iterate through these, we will go through, I'll kind of explain the scenario, the pros, and kind of what you'll see. And then Todd will take over and kind of run through a little bit of a demo and actually show that in practice. He'll kind of show you a little bit of a look underneath the hood inside the Flow Designer and how these things are built. We'll come back, we'll see if there's any specific questions around this particular use case, answer any questions that we might have, and then we can go on and move to the other use cases. So like I mentioned, we have a total of 4, and the first one really is the new customer onboarding, right? So typical situation, we've got our Salesforce, we've got a new customer opportunity that's been won in Salesforce, right? So we want to see that automatic setup for customer support in ServiceNow through the Integration Hub. So we're going to be able to retrieve the account, the contact, the contract data from Salesforce to sync with ServiceNow instance and create those records and that foundational data about that customer automatically. That'll also set it up so that we can see ongoing updates. So if there's a change, a contact information change that's maintained in Salesforce, we can see that information in data flow. So the pros to this are being able to have real-time data parity between Salesforce and ServiceNow. We're providing customer service agents with up-to-date information on customers, right? They're not hoping and praying that the phone number, hoping and praying that the email address for this person is right. And we're eliminating or at least reducing the manual steps for onboarding to create a higher customer satisfaction, right? So we can get somebody up and running in ServiceNow CSM a heck of a lot faster because we don't have to wait until specific individuals that are used to onboarding customers do all these things. We can automate as much as we can. So what you'll see in this demo is where we create an account and a contact in Salesforce that will trigger the Integration Hub flow, and we'll see that account and contact information in ServiceNow pop up. So in that way, that'll enable that customer to be able to go in through the ServiceNow service portal for CSM and be able to interact just as they would. And we can see that happen pretty quickly, almost in real time, to eliminate those manual tasks otherwise. So Todd, I'll flip it over to you and let you kind of take on that first use case before we dip our toes into the next use case. Sounds good. Thanks, Adam.
All right, so first I'm going to show from the ServiceNow side. So I come into just our list of accounts here, and we have a new account that's going to be brought over because the business was just won. So the new account is going to be Bose Acoustics. I can see here, ServiceNow, it doesn't exist yet. When I come to the Salesforce side, I've got the account up here, and I can see the type is still listed as prospect. So this is what our trigger scenario is. When we change from a prospect to a customer, this is going to trigger, it's called an outbound message in Salesforce. And this consumes a webhook endpoint on the ServiceNow side. So we comes into ServiceNow, and there's as part of the Salesforce Spoke plugin, it installed this webhook decision policy, and we can see we've got a number of different objects listed out here. So in this case, it's going to be sending over an account object, so we know it's going to follow this account subflow. So if I come into Flow Designer, I've got my account subflow V2 listed here. I can look at the executions, and I can see this new entry if I came in just a minute ago. I open that up. So we can quickly get to the triggered execution of that specific flow. And as a developer, this is very powerful. Just being able to see exactly what happened. It passes over the runtime values for everything that came in. We can see each of the data elements. So just coming from the old workflow type of approach where you'd have to get something to trigger it and then hover over it and hope you could see the error. It's just so much cleaner. You can follow it through step by step and what happened. Obviously, in the scenarios where it works successfully, that's great. But this is even more powerful when you're trying to troubleshoot issues. And you can see exactly what step it failed on and what the values were at that point. So in this case, we're bringing the data in. It tries to do a lookup on the account record. It did not find any, meaning that that record doesn't exist yet. So it goes to this next step and creates a new account. So you can see the table that it went into, and then here all the values wrote to that record. So if I go back to my account list and go to Bows, I can see this was now created. I have another flow that's set up based on this. So that would only create the parent account record. But when we want to get that additional relationship data, we need to call some additional requests from Salesforce. So we have another flow here that every time account is created and the correlation ID is not empty, meaning that it came from Salesforce, we can use this action that pulls in relationship data for our existing account. So all we have to do is pass in the account ID that was used in Salesforce, and then it gives us a list of different relationships points. So I'm pulling in contracts or contacts right now, but you can get a whole bunch of other, contracts, opportunities related to that case, orders. So just by having that one data element of the ID, we can pull in so much more information into ServiceNow. So if I click into this account, we can see the basic information that was at the account level, as well as those relational contacts that were created as part of that second flow. So those brought in these records here, but we could populate, all of these different related lists using that same get relationship call. So super powerful, and having the ability to do that with just a few data elements is great. All right, that is it for use case number one.
Cool. And Todd, before we completely move on, maybe we can go to the actual one of the flows or one of the subflows and kind of, we kind of ran through it pretty fast, but maybe just kind of walk through what those different actions are and what those different actions look like, just so we can kind of give it a little bit deeper dive on some of the tasks here, what we're using for a spoke, and maybe what might be a little bit more custom.
Sure, let me pull up a different one actually.
And if you've got that saved for another one, we can table it for now.
Yeah, I was going to touch on it for the case creation, which might be the next one.
Oh, okay. Yeah, let's just go back to the slide deck and then
Sure.
we'll flow right into that. All right, so use case number 2 is the case creation. So as we talked about in one of the earlier slides, giving visibility to the sales team about what's going on with their customers from a service standpoint is huge, right? How many times does the sales team try to call the service team or pester people to try to find out and update, where they are, because they want to go talk to that same customer about another opportunity, but they don't want to walk into a lion's den, right? So they want able to create a case from ServiceNow into Salesforce, giving the sales visibility into that customer service activity, so they don't have to pick up the phone call, so they don't have to send that email. So they don't have to try to chase people and constantly, not be necessarily sure where things are from a customer service standpoint and from a customer satisfaction standpoint. And also, plenty of times customers will ask a salesperson for, hey, I want a report of all the things you guys did for us this month, or I want a report for all the tickets that we open and how we're utilizing you and leveraging your support structure for us, right? So this enables the sales team to have the exact information that they need in their system, that they use, that they don't need to learn a new system. They can, get it all right at their fingertips in the system that they're most comfortable with, right? So the pros to this are increasing visibility across the organizational teams, enhanced account awareness, and really the sales team not caught off guard and not constantly bothering the service delivery team for status updates. So what you'll see is that when a customer creates a new case in ServiceNow, that new case is created also in Salesforce as almost like a shadow case for what's happening from an engagement standpoint in ServiceNow. We'll see that shadow case created in Salesforce with as much information, with as much relevant information as we choose to set up in that integration hub mapping. So the case is updated and closed in ServiceNow by this customer support agent, and we'll see that same information and same actions taken in Salesforce. So we'll be in near real-time parity as between Salesforce and ServiceNow to give everybody the view of the situation for that particular customer at the same time. So Todd, I'll let you kind of switch over to that screen and into the ServiceNow screens and Salesforce screens and kind of walk everybody through that.
Sounds good. All right, so in this scenario, we're going to start from the customer perspective. So as George Warren, I am logged into the CSM portal within ServiceNow, and I want to report an issue with billing. So just following the service catalog here, I want to submit an issue with one of my products cases. I can select a existing asset or product if it's applicable, and then type in my issue. You can provide the contextual details up front. If that isn't helpful to the customer, they can submit the case. It'll automatically be brought to the case that was created, see the information that the case was for. And now if we go back to the back end, this is going to call this flow. So when a case is created and it's not a product lead, and we do not have this linked already to a Salesforce case with the correlation ID, it's going to follow this action. So when we add the action to the flow here, there's some basic fields that it asks you for to set up, the name, the status, origin, but then we have this other section here for other case fields. So this is what uses the introspection that Adam mentioned a little while ago. But rather than just giving you some hard-coded list of fields, this actually reaches out to Salesforce at the time of development. So when you add this, and pulls back all the available fields in Salesforce. So this allows you to, maybe you add a custom field to the case table within Salesforce. You can automatically pull that in and map it to your ServiceNow case so that you're populating all information that's required. So that was added just by going into the flow and selecting a new action. And if we look at some of the other things we have here, so in our installed spokes, we have Salesforce, and this is where we can see that list of actions that Adam had on the screen before and was walking us through. So we can create accounts, look up accounts. Here's the create case that we're using in the above action. We can create leads, which we'll show in a little while here. And then here's all the metadata that's used to retrieve those specific fields and used for introspection. So it actually uses another flow as part of, or another action to get that template of fields to choose from. So it's very straightforward to just choose your action. And now here, again, we're doing introspection. This is allowing us to create a new record on any table within Salesforce. So I can say, I want to create a new account partner. And I'll pull in the fields available, and we can populate those. So that's how we set up the actual integration hub piece. And then in this scenario, this is going to return our create case, a case ID, a status, and an error message. So the way we're handling that is that with an if statement here. So if the status is successful, we're going to update the case with the case ID. Our error handling right now is just set up that if it fails, it's set to log that error message so that the administrator can go in and look at that. So we go back to Salesforce for that scenario we just looked at. So I was George Warren, who is a Boxio customer. If I refresh, I can see this new case came in for my billing issue. The contact is set appropriately to George Warren, and I have the case ID in the subject. I have all that information from the case.
Yeah, case is out of box. That's a CSM for the customer service management.
Oh, was there a question? Thank you. All right, so as a sales representative.
Yeah, at a high level, if you think about it, for CSM, in ServiceNow, there's CSM and ITSM. So CSM is customer service management, which is where case resides, and ITSM, which is the incident, problem and change, is their IT service management. So those are the two modules. CSM.
I think that might have been a mistake coming. Somebody unmuted themselves by accident.
All right, sounds good. I'll keep going.
Yeah,
here.
it did.
So just looking at the case here as a from the sales side, I might see this case come over and realize that this something needs to happen with this case. I need to let the service team know. So I can add a case comment and say, this has high visibility. Please escalate or something, and save that comment. So this is going to trigger another outbound message within from Salesforce to use that webhook that we talked about earlier. So we come back to our decision tree. We can see there's another object for case comment webhook, and it's going to call this subflow here. If I go look at the case then in ServiceNow, see our new billing issue case here. I can see that a work note was added from Salesforce that we want to escalate this case. So it's currently P3. I'm going to up it to P1. Move it to open and reply back to the sales representative that we increased it. So I'll save this record. So this is going to, just by saving our case that is associated with a Salesforce case, it's going to call another flow, which is update case. So in this scenario, we have if our case has a correlation ID and one of these fields change, it's going to start this flow. In this case, update a record. So this is one of the generic actions. And I selected case, and then what the ID was from Salesforce. And then using those introspection fields, I'm able to set the exact fields that I want. So if I come back to Salesforce here, close this and reopen it, I can see status is now working, priority of high, and I can see that note that was sent over from ServiceNow. So it allows us to go back and forth and just keep the team in Salesforce updated on exactly what's happening.
Awesome, thanks, Todd. And I broke my own rule. I said we would pause for questions after use case scenario 1. So we do have a couple of questions here. And so Sam asks, I think this is based on the use case scenario 1. So he asks, how are you going back to previous activity in the flow after you move down? So I think this is just about navigating through the instances of the flow that get called. So maybe you can show on your screen how you can click into different actions or different actions in the flow itself as you're designing it. As you click each one, it should expand that part of the action. So right now, Todd is looking at update record, and this is giving him the ability to add different fields or add different mappings to that particular one. Now, when he's looking at some of the transactions, he can actually see the data as it came in. So there's a couple of different views inside of the Flow Designer that take a little bit of time to get used to, but you can see if you're looking at one of the transactional ones, you can actually see the data just like Todd was doing. He clicked on some of the raw text to be able to see the data that was received by that particular action and by that piece of the flow. So I think generally, to answer your question, if you click into each one of those actions and scroll up and down, it will expand, or if you click a new one, it will expand that one. So you can see the action expand as you kind of click through it. Hopefully that answers your. Yeah.
Just to throw a caveat on there. So if you're executing a flow and you get to step 3 or 4, and maybe you need to sort of recurse back to step 2 in order to maybe follow a different logical path, is there capability there so that you can kind of loop back in your flow?
Yeah, so there's a few options there actually. We go to one of our earlier ones. So this is lookup records for account. This is where we brought in the contacts for our account. You can see here we have our for each item. So this is how we handle loops in ServiceNow. So you would have an array of records or an array that we can loop through, and then for each piece we perform some action or multiple actions. So in this case, we had those 2 contact records. So I can see here for each item, it's 1 of 2. So in this case, Janet Johnson, and if I change that to the next row, it's Bill Smith. So that's how we would handle a loop. And you could have more than one action underneath that loop structure, but in this case, we just have this one.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. And something to also touch upon is when you're actually developing the flow. So right now, Todd is looking at the execution of a flow, so you can see real data that came in and it was iterated upon in that execution of that flow. But if we go back to the flow, there's actually a test button, and while you're developing and while you're working on some of these development of these flows, you can use that test button to really make it easy to push the flow through to the different steps, give it a source record to start from, so you can actually don't have to go in and kind of impersonate a customer or submit a new record. You can actually use existing information and test it that way, which is a hugely powerful capability from a developer standpoint to really make it easier to iterate through your testing and make sure it's actually doing exactly what you want. The other question we have here is from Steven, and it's about integrating with the SunGuard Omni product. I will tell you from my standpoint, I'm not familiar with that particular product. Todd, I'm not sure if you are, but I guess it all comes down to, what are the capabilities, and where does that system live, right? If it's in the cloud, typically the integration is going to be a little bit easier, a little bit more straightforward, because there are ideally going to be APIs available for that product to be able to connect to that are publicly accessible. If not, that doesn't mean that the possibility is dead. Obviously, there's things like the mid server that will allow ServiceNow's obviously cloud-facing system and cloud-facing platform to be able to connect internal to your infrastructure, whether it's through APIs that are exposed or whether it's through a JDBC connection, direct database connection, or any other type of way to interact with that system. So as long as those systems, as long as there's a tool set out there that's fairly modern, then you should be able to connect to it. And Todd's kind of showing all the integrative capabilities here, whether we're ingesting XML or taking a SOAP request or ingesting SOAP or JDBC connection. There's really a good amount of option and opportunity to integrate with. Just there doesn't necessarily have to be a pre-built spoke that ServiceNow offers or that's available on the ServiceNow store. That's where, utilizing the scripting capabilities or utilizing some of these more bare bones functionality of the Integration Hub really come into play, so you can design and build exactly what you need for your purpose.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I haven't heard of that product either, but I was just going to say, we have these abilities. So Integration Hub, depending on your level, gives you access to these steps within creating your own actions. So the most common one we use is REST to do a web service integration, but some of these other ones are available depending on the Integration Hub subscription, and you can easily set your own integration up using those. So if you go to REST, then it just asks me to input, the connection details, any sort of parameters that I have. Maybe I want to do a post, and then it exposes the request body. So most applications these days have some sort of external REST API. So that's typically what we use when we're coming into an engagement that doesn't, and we have an application that doesn't have a pre-built spoke.
Awesome. A couple more questions came in here, Todd. One of the questions is, can we pass attachments from ServiceNow to Salesforce? I assume through a case management type of approach, either we're creating or updating that case. I assume the answer is yes, but it's all, again, probably all down to the Salesforce API capabilities. Are you aware of something that exists to be able to do attachments?
We can actually take a look here. I don't know if it is one of the pre-built actions, but I can say definitively, yes, you can pass attachments. If it's not available here as one of the pre-built actions, it's just a matter of from the attachment table in ServiceNow, you get that information and encode the file as base64 encoded string, and then you send it over to Salesforce. So absolutely, you can send it. I'm not seeing an action. Just a quick glance here, but for previous customers, we've done that as a manual integration or creating it ourselves to do so.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, right? Because I think the spokes that ServiceNow comes up with and builds, obviously they can't come up with every single use case, every scenario, right? They're doing their best to continually improve those. They've already come out with new versions of the Salesforce spoke. We can see this is version 1.2. So as time goes on, more spokes will become available, more actions to existing spokes will become available. Things will change. Everybody knows that APIs change, products change very fast, if not faster than they ever have before. So I think of the spokes as a good framework for being able to easily do very common things, and other capabilities where we don't necessarily have pre-built actions or pre-built spoke actions defined. That's where we can use and define our own actions, which take a little bit more time to build, but we're being able to get to that point eventually. So with the Integration Hub, it's super flexible in the way to adapt to things you need to do, as long as the complementary API or the complementary system can receive those commands or receive those pieces of data. And looking at here, I think I'm seeing a couple more questions. Oh, looks like Andrew, you already answered it. Okay, cool. So let's proceed to use case number 3 and keep moving forward. We know we have about 15 minutes left on the scheduled time frame, so we'll run through these last 2 scenarios and then kind of open up to Q&A at the end here. So
one other
use
question
case. Oh,
here,
go ahead.
Around domain separation with the credentials. So Ryan, I haven't specifically run into that, and I have to look up what the domain separation rules are, because actually just, I think it was in Paris, they changed the how you set up the connection. So there's actually another tab in the Flow Designer interface where you can have multiple connections for different or for a single integration application. So there could be multiple connections to connect to several different customer Salesforce instances, for instance. So we'd have to look into that. All right, Adam, go ahead.
Good deal. So use case 3. So the ability to create a lead in Salesforce. So the scenario here is where we've got a customer, they have an interest in a new product or something else that's offered. So they're already engaging through the customer service management portal within ServiceNow. So the idea here is that they can submit a product interest catalog item that's made accessible through the portal. So they submit that through the same portal that they log service cases for or cases in. The catalog item automatically creates a lead record in Salesforce for follow up by the sales team. So the pros here obviously is that we allow salespeople to be immediately aware of new opportunities. We streamline the communication between the customer and sales, and we reduce the data entry and manual work and maybe the telephone playing that might happen otherwise if we were not able to kind of connect those 2 entities together. So what you'll see here in the demo is the customer will go into the ServiceNow portal. So Todd will impersonate a customer. He'll search for an interesting product. Could be a model, could be a product name, could be a service, could be just anything that the company that's providing the portal can offer to their customers. We'll see the customer contact complete the form and submit it, and then we'll see the salesperson automatically see a sales lead pop up in Salesforce for them to follow up on.
All right, so coming back to our customer view here. So just on the home screen here, as a customer, I can see this new publication that these new routers are available. So I'm going to search for that router in our catalog. I can see there's this section for product interest. Just asking for some basic contact information. It automatically pulled in my information from my contact record, and I can add some more comments. And submit. So that submitted the request to create that lead. On the Flow Designer side, it's going to be similar to our case creation. So we have a specific case or create lead action, and again, it captures some basic information and then allows us to use that introspection to add any other relevant fields that we want. So I can look at my recent flow. I can see this case created triggered this. I can see those runtime values being sent over. If I come back to Salesforce, look at all open leads and see this new lead came in. So see, we've got this new open lead. They haven't been contacted yet. basic contact details for a customer and a description of what they were looking into. And then they can follow their normal process to reach out and try to make a sale.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. A pretty simple flow, but could be a pretty powerful one to connect, customers to salespeople. Maybe get a quote, maybe follow up with some more information, or just kind of gauge the interest in that particular product. So the last scenario that we want to touch upon, and then we'll really get into the full Q&A if people have more questions, would be the new salesperson onboarding. And this is less of necessarily a customer service integration. It's still with Salesforce, but the scenario here is we have a new sales team member that's being onboarded and needs to get started on work assignments right away, build out their pipeline and make sure that they have opportunities ready to go and understand the landscape of where they're going to be focusing their efforts. But they don't want to wait days for Salesforce account provisioning, right? So we want to streamline that process in terms of getting that new salesperson access to the tools that they need, whatever it could be. It could be a multitude of things in addition to Salesforce. Salesforce, obviously, what we're focusing on here, but we've helped our customers with these types of activities in terms of an IT onboarding perspective, where when a manager or when anybody gives the proper approval for that particular access, they can get exactly what they need provisioned almost immediately, as far as that, as long as those approvals have been taken care of here. So the pros to this are obviously quicker time to value for the onboarded person. We're giving them access to exactly what they need to start doing their work, to start doing their job, and getting ramped up and acclimated. It's fully automated, no human intervention other than approval, and that approval is more or less just based on your process internally, how that needs to work, and whether you have either procurement or manager or a VP approval based on the need for different things for your work job description. And then what you'll see here is new employee submits a request for Salesforce account via IT service portal. This could be, we're going to do the example of a new employee requesting it specifically, but it could be an onboarding process that kicks off. It could be a manager submitting the request. It should be an HR person submitting that request. It could be an email that's consumed. So many ways to initiate and trigger this process. And then the hiring manager approves that. That's going to be automatically approved for demo purposes, just so we don't have to jump through that hoop. And then finally, you'll see that new user creation, the new user account automatically created in Salesforce, and then that person obviously will get notified of that new account created, so they can go ahead and proceed with their work that they need to do. So we'll go ahead and Todd, I'll kick it over to you to kind of show that final use case, and then we'll open it up to any questions that anybody might have.
Sounds good. So for this example, I am going to start from the internal service portal. So this is where a team member can, submit incidents about their laptops, request new hardware, and so forth. Here I'm going to have a new business application for onboarding in Salesforce, get some basic information about our customer. Need to make sure I have a unique enough email address so it is allowed in Salesforce, and submit this. So this is going to create a new catalog or request item and request within ServiceNow. It will trigger a flow very similar to our other ones. Only this one is using the create user. So this one is that it's the trigger catalog. So if you're familiar with setting up catalog items with workflows, there's now an option to select a flow designer flow rather than a workflow to be triggered when that's submitted. We then have this action available to get all variables for a specific catalog item. So in this case, we're getting, we pass in the requested item record and then the catalog item template that we want to use. So in this case, the new user onboarding. that are there. Once we have that action created above it, we can pass those variables into our subsequent actions within the flow. So we're passing in those details to the flow here, giving them some basic roles, location information. Again, we have the introspection to pull in additional records. And in this case, if it's successful, we're going to update our request item and say it was completed. So this one actually failed. So let's take a look. All right, so we got a scope issue here. So I actually created the user, was successful, came back with our ID. And then when it came to this, it created the log, but there was a write issue with the scope to our request item table. So just a good example of what happens, you know, when we're trying to troubleshoot an issue. We can quickly get in that execution and see exactly what step it failed at and the error. But from the Salesforce side, if we come in, refresh our user records, you can see this new user came in. They're active, they have the basic sales team role. They're provided some other basic information, but that's how we can manage our user records.
Awesome. Thanks, Todd. Cool. With just a few minutes left, we'll see if there's any questions. I know there seems to be one question about whether there's a summary diagram or an overview of more complicated flows. Todd, I don't believe there's more of a diagram, but obviously the main flow can reference subflows or other things that can be kind of opened up in tandem with the tabs inside of the flow designer itself. Is there anything you're aware of that would provide more of a design summary or overview more graphically?
No, nothing I can think of. I think that, yeah, the best thing there is, like you said, you know, a flow calling other subflows. You could also run a report based on like what tables are being triggered. So for instance, you know, maybe you want to look at all flows that are running on, I don't even remember what the, I'd have to find the exact condition, but like all flows running on the account table, for instance, you could pull that in, but there isn't like a good UI interface that I'm aware of to show that.
Okay, and I think one other question that maybe wasn't answered quite yet from Sam, can you redirect the flow to use different paths based on the loops of value? I believe the answer is yes. You'd have to do some more conditions inside of the flow itself. So Todd, I guess if you wanted to have a conditional check inside of the flow when maybe Janet was being processed as opposed to Bill being processed, maybe if we had 10 different contacts flowing in and we wanted different actions to happen based on maybe the department they were in or based on a number of different things, we can have those conditional checks inside of the flow and then have sub paths to that loop to be able to do different things. So I believe the answer to that, Sam, is yes. Obviously, you'd have to kind of define what those conditions are inside that flow and then just achieve and put those actions in to be able to complete those. Andrew, Michelle, any other questions that we missed that you know that are out there?
I don't think so.
There was one. Did you comment on the one about custom scope or global scope?
I did. Yep. Just with regards to using some of the utility actions within Flow Designer to do that. No, I didn't comment on scope.
Yeah, I would say, Monty, if you're building a completely new application that It is best practice to create it in its own scope rather than using global. And then I would create the actions in its own scope, and then like flows that are more applicable to like customer service, I create in that scope.
Cool. So Todd, I think we can go back to the PowerPoint presentation and just hang out on the last slide here while we wrap up. Michelle or Andrew, did you guys want to have any, I guess, closing words for us? And were there any other last questions that we can help answer? Anybody?
No, I don't think so. We're 2 minutes over, so we've gone exactly 60 minutes here. We want to just thank everybody for their time. We've recorded this, so we will certainly post it, in a variety of different places. In the meantime, if you folks have any questions, don't hesitate to email hello@highmetric.com. Otherwise, we thank you for your time and hope to speak with you soon. Thanks so much.